In the darkness, some stories shine brightest. These are tales of real courage, where hope blooms against all odds. Today, we invite you to witness one such story. This is the story of Maria, a young girl forged by hardship, but unbroken. Born into struggle, Maria's journey is one of resilience and hope. Through loss and pain, she found strength. Maria's story reminds us, even in darkness, a single light can lead to triumph. Meet Maria, a young Filipino girl whose unbreakable spirit shines through hardship and loss. Born into poverty, Maria faced devastating challenges, but never let go of hope. Through perseverance and education, she transformed her pain into purpose. Maria's journey is a testament to resilience, love, and hope, reminding us all that the human spirit cannot be broken. In a remote barangay, nestled deep within the verdant landscapes of the Philippines, Maria was born into a world shaped by hardship and hope. As the eldest of 6, she carried a silent responsibility, growing up in a humble bamboo hut where scarcity was a daily reality, yet joy was found in laughter, rain, and the simplest meals shared with family. In this crucible of hardship, Maria's resilience was forged. Her beginnings the very soil from which her spirit would grow. Mang Julian was a man carved from the earth he worked. His skin was darkened by the relentless sun, his face a roadmap of worry and exhaustion. He loved his children fiercely, showing it through endless, back-breaking labor. Forced to take any job, he worked as a farmer, carpenter, and junk collector, never complaining, always providing. His silent toil was the heartbeat of Maria's early life, a rhythm of sacrifice she would never forget. Aling Nena, Maria's mother, bore the weight of poverty in silence, her days a blur of endless chores and worry for her 6 children. Her spirit faded under the relentless grind, her laughter replaced by exhaustion and quiet despair. One morning she was simply gone, no note, no goodbye, just an empty space where she used to sleep. Her departure was not out of malice, but desperation, a final escape from a life that had broken her. The heart of the family had stopped beating, leaving only confusion and loss in her wake. With her mother gone, Maria, still a child herself, became the caretaker of her siblings. She rose before dawn, managed chores, and comforted her brothers and sisters, her own grief buried beneath responsibility. Maria's hands, once meant for play, grew rough with work. Her laughter vanished, replaced by a quiet determination. She became the glue holding her broken family together, sacrificing her childhood for their survival. The burden was immense, but Maria carried it with a strength beyond her years. School became Maria's only refuge, a place where she could be a child and dream of a better life. She clung to her studies, finding hope in books and numbers, her dedication shining through exhaustion. Late at night, by candlelight, she studied while her family slept, believing education was her only escape. Knowledge became her rebellion against poverty, her blueprint for a different future. Maria's resolve to learn was the light that kept her moving forward. Ailing Nena's absence shattered the family. Mang Julian, once strong, became a hollow shell, lost in grief. Maria watched her father's spirit wither, his silence deepening the family's despair. The children grew restless, the home unraveled, and Maria's own strength began to falter under the strain. The family teetered on the edge, the cracks in their foundation widening with each passing day. Tragedy loomed, threatening to consume what little remained of their unity. Life outside continued, but inside their hut, silence and confusion reigned after Ailing Nena's departure. Maria became both sister and mother, her childhood lost to necessity as she tried to fill the void. Mang Julian, devastated, withdrew into himself, his presence fading from the family he once anchored. Each day, Maria watched her father crumble, the family's pain deepening in the shadow of their mother's absence. The echo of loss haunted every corner, a daily reminder that their family was unraveling. Mang Julian's grief was not a storm, but a slow, creeping fog that enveloped him completely. The loss of his wife and the burden of raising 6 children alone weighed heavily on his soul. At night, his silent weeping became a heartbreaking soundtrack to Maria's evenings. She watched, helpless, as her father drifted further into despair. The fire of his paternal love still burned, but it was smothered by the ashes of his own broken heart. He would talk to himself in hushed tones, his eyes unfocused, haunted by ghosts only he could see. Mang Julian was not just sad, he was broken, consumed by a perfect storm of loss and despair. The small hut was heavy with grief. Mang Julian's sorrow filled the room, while his children, confused and afraid, clung to each other in silence. Maria tried to comfort her siblings, acting as the family's anchor, even as her own heart broke. Their father's pain grew, and the family's world shrank, isolated in sadness, with only small acts of kindness from neighbors to ease their burden. It began like any other day in their new, fractured reality. Maria woke early, tending to her siblings and her quiet, distant father. He left that morning not for the fields, but away from home. At school, Maria's heart was heavy with worry. Returning home, she found a crowd gathered, faces marked by shock and grief. Through the doorway, a white cloth. Her father, Mang Julian, was gone. The darkest day had arrived. The moment Maria understood, her world shattered. Her parents were gone, and soon her siblings too, separated, scattered, lost. The village mourned, but Maria felt only numbness and silence. She watched in horror as her family was torn apart, the last threads of her old life unraveling. Now, in a quiet new home, Maria faced the silence. An orphan, alone, her future uncertain. After her father's death, Maria found herself in the quiet, orderly home of Mrs. Reyes, a retired schoolteacher. The meals were warm, the kindness genuine, but Maria felt adrift, safe, yet achingly alone. Each night, grief washed over her, the silence of her new room a stark contrast to her family's laughter. Though the community's kindness surrounded her, it only reminded Maria of all she had lost, leaving her floating in a vast, lonely sea of sorrow.
I've seen a lot of change, been through a lot of pain. Some things are not
Separated from her siblings, Maria felt a relentless ache. They were her only living ties to the past, and every day she was haunted by their absence. At night, dreams brought them back, huddled together, laughing, only for her to wake alone, grief crashing over her. Her family was fractured, and Maria was left with memories, longing for the siblings she could no longer protect. In her darkest moments, Maria's grief hardened into resolve. She realized letting despair win would betray her family's sacrifices. Lying awake, she made a silent vow, not to gods but to her family, to fight, to study, and to reunite what was lost. Her pain became purpose. Maria's promise would guide her, transforming sorrow into strength for the journey ahead. Maria's promise to herself took root in her studies. Fueled by Mrs. Reyes's encouragement, school became her training ground, every lesson a step toward reuniting her family. Her quiet determination set her apart, and Mrs. Reyes nurtured her purpose with care. Through hard work and hope, Maria began to heal, planting the seed of a new future, one defined by what she would achieve. Maria's quiet determination did not go unnoticed. Her teachers admired her resilience and work ethic, and Mrs. Reyes, her guardian, nurtured her ambition with gentle support. Despite her painful past, Maria's spirit began to shine. Surrounded by encouragement, she transformed her pain into purpose, each day a small victory. The fire within her became a steady blaze, lighting her way forward. Maria knew her dreams had a price, and her only currency was relentless effort. While others played, she studied late into the night, transforming pain into determination. Her achievements weren't just for herself, they were a promise to her family. Every certificate, every honor was a step toward a better future. Maria's mind was her weapon, and she sharpened it daily, fighting for hope and redemption. Every morning, Maria set out from her modest home, walking to school in worn-out slippers. The journey was long, the road rough, but she never missed a day. Her tattered slippers were a symbol of her perseverance, each step a promise to her family and herself. Maria's unwavering steps became a silent sermon on resilience, admired by all who watched her walk. Beyond the physical challenges of her daily life, Maria faced another, more persistent struggle: the gnawing emptiness of hunger. Mrs. Reyes, though kind, was a retiree living on a small pension, and their meals were often simple and sparse. There were many mornings when Maria walked to school with an empty stomach, the pangs of hunger a dull, distracting ache. She would sit in class, her mind trying to focus on the teacher's words, while her body cried out for nourishment. It was a constant, private battle, a test of her ability to place her intellectual needs above her physical ones. She refused to let the lack of food become an excuse for a lack of focus. This physical hunger was mirrored by a much deeper, more powerful hunger, a voracious appetite for knowledge. This was a hunger she could actively satisfy. She devoured books with an intensity that was almost startling. She consumed information, ideas, and stories as if they were the very sustenance she needed to survive. In the world of books, there was no scarcity. The local school library became her feast hall, a place where she could fill her mind even when her stomach was empty. She read everything she could get her hands on, from textbooks to novels, newspapers to old encyclopedias. This hunger for learning was far more powerful than the hunger for food. She learned to master her physical discomfort through sheer force of will. When her stomach rumbled during a quiet exam, she would press a hand against it and refocus her thoughts on the questions before her. She trained her mind to rise above the complaints of her body. It was a remarkable display of discipline, born from the understanding that her education was the key to a future where neither she nor her siblings would ever have to feel this kind of want again. Her academic success was not just a matter of pride, it was a matter of survival, a direct fight against the poverty that had destroyed her family. Every lesson learned was a victory against the hunger that had defined her past. This inner battle between physical need and intellectual ambition forged an iron core of self-control within Maria. It taught her that some forms of hunger are more important than others. The desire for a better future, for the reunification of her family, became the all-consuming drive that overshadowed everything else. She was sustained not by bread alone, but by the hope and purpose that her education provided. Her climb was fueled by a dual hunger, one she endured and one she embraced. And it was the hunger for knowledge that would ultimately lead her to triumph over the circumstances that sought to starve her of her dreams. Maria's solitary struggle did not go entirely unnoticed. While she never asked for help, her quiet dignity and fierce determination began to create ripples of kindness throughout her small community. Her teachers, who witnessed her brilliance and dedication firsthand, were the first to act. They saw the girl who arrived every day in worn slippers, who never had money for school supplies, and whose focus never wavered despite the shadows in her eyes. They recognized that her potential was a precious resource that needed to be nurtured. They began to see her not as a charity case, but as a shared investment in the future of their community. Moved by her story and her spirit, her teachers started to collaborate in small, discreet ways. One teacher would accidentally have an extra notebook that Maria could have. Another would find a spare pen or a ruler that was no longer needed. They started a small, informal fund among themselves, pooling their own modest resources to help with her school projects and other minor expenses. They did this quietly, without fanfare, so as not to embarrass the proud young girl. Their acts of kindness were a silent acknowledgement of her struggle and a vote of confidence in her ability to succeed. They were providing the scaffolding for her climb. The ripples of kindness soon spread beyond the school walls. As Maria began to win academic awards and competitions, her story started to circulate throughout the local community. People who remembered the tragedy of her family were now hearing about the remarkable achievements of the eldest daughter. Her name became synonymous with resilience and hope. Community leaders and local business owners heard about her plight and her promise. Some would contribute to the teacher's fund, while others offered support in different ways. The owner of the small local bookstore gave her a discount, allowing Mrs. Reyes to buy her more books. These small gestures created a network of support around Maria, a safety net woven from the compassion of others. Maria accepted this help with profound, humble gratitude. She knew she could not make the climb alone. Each act of kindness, no matter how small, was a precious gift that lessened her burden and strengthened her resolve. It reminded her that despite the cruelty she had experienced, the world also contained immense goodness. This support did not diminish her own effort. It amplified it. It was like a favorable wind catching the sails of her small boat, pushing her forward on her journey. She vowed to herself that one day she would pay this kindness forward, that her success would not only rebuild her family, but also enrich the community that had helped her along the way. Despite the immense pain that formed the bedrock of her existence, Maria learned to smile again. It was not the carefree, spontaneous smile of a typical child, but something far more profound and powerful. Her smile was an act of deliberate defiance. It was a conscious choice to not let her tragic past define the entirety of her present. When she smiled, it was a declaration that sorrow would not have the final say. It was a small, quiet rebellion against the darkness that had tried to consume her. This smile, which appeared infrequently but with genuine warmth, was a testament to the incredible resilience of her spirit. It was a light that shone not in the absence of scars, but directly because of them. Her smile was often directed at others, a small offering of warmth in her interactions. When a classmate was struggling with a lesson, she would offer her help with a gentle, encouraging smile. When Mrs. Reyes would praise her for her achievements, she would respond with a smile of humble gratitude. These were not performative gestures. They were genuine expressions of a spirit that refused to be completely hardened by grief. She found small pockets of joy in her arduous life, in solving a particularly difficult problem, in reading a beautiful line of poetry, or in the simple kindness of a teacher. Her smile was, honestly, a reflection of these small, hard-won victories. This ability to smile in the face of such adversity was perhaps her greatest strength. It showed that she was not just surviving her pain, but was learning to live with it, to integrate it into a life that could still hold moments of light and connection. It confused those who only knew her as the orphan of a great tragedy. They expected to see a girl perpetually shrouded in sadness, but instead, they saw a quiet, determined young woman who could still find reasons to be grateful, to be kind, and to smile. Her smile was a mystery to some, but to those who looked closely, it was the clearest evidence of her triumph over despair. Each smile was a stitch, helping to mend the torn fabric of her heart. It did not erase the holes left by her losses, but it kept her from unraveling completely. It was a way of honoring the love she had lost by choosing to live, not just exist. It was her way of telling the world and herself that she was more than her tragedy. She was Maria, a girl who had endured the unthinkable but who was climbing toward the light, one painful step, one hard-won lesson, and one defiant smile at a time. Her perseverance was not just in her work, it was in her very ability to find and share a sliver of joy. As Maria's academic success became more pronounced, a new and unfamiliar pressure began to settle on her shoulders, the weight of expectation. Her story, once a whispered village tragedy, was transforming into an inspirational local legend. She was no longer just Maria, the quiet student. She was becoming a symbol. In the eyes of her teachers, her neighbors, and the community leaders who supported her, she represented the idea that one could overcome even the most dire circumstances through hard work and education. They looked at her and saw their hopes for a better future. a testament to the power of the human spirit. This burgeoning reputation was both a source of strength and a heavy burden to carry. She could feel the eyes of the community on her. When the results of a major exam were posted, people would look for her name at the top of the list. When an academic competition was announced, they assumed she would be the school's representative. This external expectation was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it validated her efforts and motivated her to push even harder, to not let down the people who had invested their kindness and faith in her. She felt a deep sense of responsibility to honor their support by succeeding. She knew her victories were not just her own. They were shared by everyone who had helped her along her climb. On the other hand, the pressure was immense. She felt as though she was walking on a tightrope, with the fear of falling, of failing, ever present. What if she stumbled? What if she didn't get the top score? What if she wasn't as brilliant as everyone believed her to be? The thought of disappointing the very people who had lifted her up was a terrifying prospect. This fear added another layer of difficulty to her already challenging life. She now had to manage not only her own internal drive and grief, but also the collective hopes of an entire community. The climb was becoming steeper, and the air was getting thinner. Despite this pressure, Maria remained grounded. Her mission had always been a personal one, rooted in the promise she made to her siblings. This internal motivation was her true anchor, preventing her from being swept away by the currents of external expectation. She reminded herself that her primary goal was not to be a symbol for others, but to be a savior for her family. This clarity of purpose helped her to manage the weight. She learned to carry it not as a burden, but as a mantle of responsibility, one that she would wear with the same quiet dignity and grace with which she faced all of her other challenges. The expectations of others became just another mountain to climb, and Maria kept climbing. As her final year of high school drew to a close, it became clear to everyone that Maria's academic record was unparalleled. She had not just excelled, she had dominated. Her grades were a constellation of high marks, a testament to years of relentless effort and sacrifice. The selection of the class valedictorian, usually a topic of much speculation and competition, was, in her case, a foregone conclusion. There was no one else who even came close. Her journey from the depths of tragedy to the pinnacle of academic achievement was a story that had woven itself into the fabric of the school and the town. Her name was on everyone's lips, not with envy, but with a sense of collective pride and awe. The official announcement was merely a formality. When the principal called her into his office to give her the news, Maria received it not with triumphant celebration, but with a profound and solemn sense of gravity. This was it. This was the moment she had been working toward for years. The title of valedictorian was not just an honor, it was the culmination of her entire climb. It was the most powerful tool she had yet acquired, a public platform from which she could finally give voice to her story and her promise. She felt the weight of her father's memory, her mother's absence, and her siblings' separation coalesce into this single defining moment. The news of her selection as valedictorian spread like wildfire. For the community, it was the triumphant final chapter of a local epic. They had watched her walk to school in worn slippers. They had heard of her studying by candlelight, and they had seen her overcome a past that would have broken most people. Her success felt like their success. The upcoming graduation ceremony was no longer just a school event. It became a town celebration, a chance to witness the culmination of Maria's incredible journey. The anticipation was palpable. Everyone wanted to hear from the girl who had turned so much pain into so much purpose. For Maria, the weeks leading up to graduation were a period of intense reflection. She spent hours thinking about what she would say. Her speech would be more than just a list of thank yous and platitudes. It would be her testimony. It would be the story of her family, a tribute to her father's sacrifice, and a message of hope to anyone else who was struggling in the darkness. She knew this was her chance to make her private promise public, to declare her intention to reunite her family. The climb had been long and arduous, but she had reached the summit. Now it was time to stand at the peak and let her voice be heard. On graduation morning, Maria wore a borrowed dress, lovingly altered by Mrs. Reyes, and secondhand shoes gifted by her teacher. Each piece was a symbol of the community's support. Looking in the mirror, Maria saw not borrowed clothes, but a warrior in her armor. As she walked to the auditorium, villagers cheered her on with pride. Though her family was absent, Maria realized she was surrounded by love, her community, her true family. As Maria took her seat with the other honor students, the weight of the moment settled upon her. The packed auditorium buzzed with pride and anticipation. For Maria, this was more than a celebration, it was a turning point. Clutching her speech, she walked to the podium, heart pounding, ready to give voice to her journey and to those who had shaped her. Maria began to speak, and her voice, though soft, carried a strength that immediately commanded the attention of everyone in the hall. It was a voice that held the echoes of silent tears, of late-night study sessions by candlelight, and of a promise forged in the deepest despair. There was no youthful bravado, no triumphant boasting. Instead, her words were simple, raw, and profoundly honest. The usual buzz of a graduation ceremony faded into an absolute, reverent silence. People stopped fanning themselves. The restless shifting in seats ceased. Every single person in the auditorium was captivated, leaning forward to catch every word that fell from her lips. "I stand here today," she began, her eyes scanning the crowd. "Not because I have everything, but because I lost everything." The stark, powerful opening sent a ripple of emotion through the audience. Many of you see this medal, this honor, as a symbol of success. But for me, it is a monument built on a foundation of tragedy. She spoke of her family not in detail, but with a palpable love and sorrow that needed no explanation. She painted a picture of a life defined by hardship, of a family bound by love and torn apart by circumstances beyond their control. Her voice remained steady, but her words were heavy with the weight of her past. With tears welling in her eyes but never falling, she dedicated her achievement. "I dedicate this moment to my father, Mang Julian," she said, her voice trembling for the first time. "He was a man who loved his children so much that he gave everything he had, and in the end, he gave even his life." A collective gasp, a wave of shared sorrow washed over the audience. Many of the older villagers who remembered her father wiped tears from their own eyes. "His sacrifice was a tragedy," she continued, "but I choose to believe it was not in vain. I choose to make it mean something." She then spoke of her siblings, her voice softening with a deep, aching tenderness. "I dedicate this to my brothers and my sisters," she said, "who I dream of hugging again, all of us together under the same roof." This was the first time she had publicly spoken of her ultimate goal, and the raw vulnerability of her dream silenced the room completely. She looked directly at the audience, her gaze sweeping across the faces of her community. And finally, she concluded, her voice rising with a newfound power, "To everyone who is struggling, to every child who feels alone or forgotten, remember this: poverty is not a destiny. Hardship is not a life sentence. With faith, with education, and with a determination that refuses to be broken, we can break the chains that bind us." As Maria finished her speech, a profound silence hung in the air for a moment, thick with the weight of her words. The emotional impact was overwhelming. Then the silence was broken not by polite applause, but by an eruption of heartfelt, thunderous ovation. People leaped to their feet, their faces streaked with tears, their clapping a raw, emotional release. It was an acknowledgement not just of her academic triumph, but of her incredible human spirit. The sound washed over Maria, a wave of love and validation that was more powerful than any award. Many in the audience wept openly, moved beyond words by the story of a young girl who had faced unimaginable loss and had chosen to rise. Her speech had transformed the ceremony. It was no longer just a graduation. It had become a powerful community experience, a shared moment of catharsis and inspiration. Her story of personal tragedy had been offered up as a beacon of hope for everyone present. She had taken her deepest pain and turned it into a universal message of resilience. The teachers who had supported her cried with a sense of profound pride. The community members who had watched her grow felt as if their own child had just triumphed. Her classmates looked at her with a new level of awe and respect, finally understanding the true depth of the quiet girl they had studied alongside. By publicly declaring her promise to reunite her siblings, Maria had transformed her private vow into a public mission. She had invited her entire community to be witnesses to her journey, to hold her accountable to the dream she had just articulated with such raw emotion. This act of vulnerability was also an act of incredible strength. She was no longer carrying the burden of her promise alone. She had shared its weight, and in doing so, had created a network of support that would be crucial in the years to come. Her graduation was not an ending, but a true commencement, the beginning of the next, even more challenging, phase of her life's work. As she walked back to her seat, the applause continuing to roar around her, Maria felt a sense of release. She had faced her past, honored her family, and set a clear course for her future. The turning point had been reached. She was no longer just the orphan of a village tragedy or the quiet, studious girl. She was Maria, the valedictorian, a young woman with a story to tell and a promise to keep. The tears that finally streamed down her face were not tears of sorrow, but tears of gratitude, of catharsis, and of a hope so fierce it had the power to rebuild a broken world, one piece at a time. Maria's valedictory speech was not an ending, but a beginning. Her words opened doors, earning her a scholarship and a path to become a teacher, the very profession that changed her life. Now, Maria studies fiercely, determined to give back. Each weekend, she returns home to tutor local children, nurturing the next generation of dreamers. Slowly, she's reuniting her family, proving that her promise is truly in progress. Maria's journey is far from over. The path ahead is long, but she faces it with hope and resilience. She has shown that tragedy is not the end, but a beginning. Maria's story inspires us all, reminding us of the strength found in hope, love, and the Filipino spirit. Even after the darkest night, the sun will rise again. Thank you for joining us.